It's not going to be graceful enough, I know. But okay. All right. And here we are. So again, thank you for joining me tonight for MEFA's presentation on the U-Plan, the power of the U-Plan prepaid tuition program. And so my name is Jonathan Hughes. I'm the Associate Director of College Planning at MEFA. And as it says here, I've worked at MEFA for over 20 years, helping families in Massachusetts prepare for college. So I have talked to thousands of families in my 20 plus years here, and I will be candid and say that savings in general is always my favorite thing to talk about with families because it's just good. It's always good. You can talk about financial aid, talk about loans, talk about all these things, and there's some good and there's some bad. Their savings is just good. I've always said many times I've spoken to so many families who have saved. I've never spoken to anyone who has regretted saving. Everyone who has saved is always glad that they've done it. And so it's something that I like to talk about and talk about the importance of, and talk about the specific ways which we have to save. And of course, tonight we're talking about the U-Plan. Quick story about the U-Plan. When I first started at MEFA, I was not working on the U-Plan prepaid tuition program. I knew of it. It sort of confused me. I didn't want to know too much about it. I want to have to answer questions about it because I didn't understand it. And then lo and behold, one day I had to start answering questions about the U-Plan. I had to learn the program, which I did. And I became a huge fan of it, especially when I did start talking to U-Plan customers and saw how much they were saving and benefiting from the program. So I really am a big fan of the U-Plan and happy to be talking about it with you. So hopefully I'm going to put you through that same process that I went through, albeit within about 45 minutes to an hour, which is the time we have allotted. So quickly about MEFA. MEFA, of course, is the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. We were created back in 1982 by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with a public service mission to help families to plan, save, and pay for college and career readiness. We do that in a variety of ways. We're here tonight as part of our planning, sort of our free guidance and education surrounding paying for college. We were created to offer loans, which is something that we still do. And then, of course, saving. We offer two savings plans, the U-Plan and the U-Fund. We're going to talk about the U-Plan tonight. We'll actually touch on both a little bit. But, of course, this is about the U-Plan. But the thing I want you to remember is we are a free resource for you to use for any questions that you may have regarding sending your kids or whoever the student is in your life to college or career guidance. So in this webinar, as I said, it will take about 45 minutes to an hour. I will be answering questions throughout. If you have any questions, you can submit them through the Q&A. The chat feature is disabled. We do have a live transcript feature, so if you want to see what I'm saying printed out on the screen, you can use that. This is a program that does take some explanation. So I imagine that you will have questions as I'm going through it. I may answer your questions right away when I see them. I may not, and if I don't, it's because I know that the answer is coming in a slide or two or a few slides down the road. So if I did not get to your question, though, we will have time for questions after. And if I don't get it then, I'll reach out to you further and answer your questions after the fact. If you're registered, which you have, I have your email address, so we can do that. So please submit your questions, and we can take them or not as the circumstances dictate. Okay, so what we are going to learn today, we're talking about the U-Plan, and we're going to talk first about the U-Plan and the U-Fund and the comparison between them. The reason that we're starting off, which is a new way of doing this presentation, starting off with this comparison, is because we offer two savings plans, and they have very similar names, the U-Plan Prepaid Tuition Program and the U-Fund 529. Many times, people are not quite sure what the difference is between the two. A lot of times, people come to this particular presentation expecting to hear about the U Fund. They've confused the two. So if you've made that mistake, don't worry. People do it all the time. But the 529 plans are really probably the most well understood and the most well known popularly ways to save for college. So we'll talk about what those are a little bit and how the U Plan is different. Okay, so we'll talk about the basics of the U Plan, about the specific benefits of the U Plan. I always say that any way that you do save for college is better than not saving. The best way to save is the way that you actually do and use those savings. But there are particular programs that carry in a little bit of an extra power, a little bit of extra benefit to them when used to save for college. And that's certainly the case with the U Plan. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the network of colleges and universities, which is important to the plan, how the U Plan is treated in terms of financial aid, and then finally, how you can enroll and manage your account online. So as I said, please keep in mind that you can ask questions throughout, and I'll be seeing those and be able to answer those as we go. So again, the difference between the U-Plan prepaid tuition program and the U-Fund 529 plan. So they're both tax-advantaged college savings plans that help you set aside funds for future college costs. Now, I mentioned that 529 plans are probably the most popular nationally, the most popular ways to save. And the way that those programs work is relatively simple to explain. You put money into a 529 account. Each state has their own 529. In Massachusetts, we have a program, which is another MEFA program called the U Fund. And so you put money in your U Fund account and it's invested. The investments are handled by Fidelity Investments, and they're invested in the market and they grow along with the market. And that is how, and they grow tax deferred, and that is how you gain value on that program. The prepaid tuition program is different. So you put money into your prepaid tuition program. It's not invested in the market. It is invested in general obligation bonds. And some of these things we will repeat later on throughout the presentation, or they'll be reflected in later slides. But you put funds in, and based on how much you put in, that buys a percentage of this year's tuition at each participating college in Massachusetts. All the participating colleges are in Massachusetts, and the percentage that you lock in depends on the amount that you put in, and it depends on the college. So in a way, you're freezing that tuition value, the percentage that you put in, against further increases. Now, as far as where the actual money goes, it's invested not in the market, but in bonds that are backed by the full faith and credit of the Commonwealth. So it's not subject to market volatility. They're in general obligation bonds. Now, what you can actually use your U-Plan funds for, that percentage that they lock in reflects tuition and mandatory fees. We'll talk about what that means in a few slides. Whereas the U-Fund, you can withdraw funds and use it for tuition, fees, room and board, books, supplies and equipment, and retain your tax-free status. So the U-Fund, you put funds in, it grows tax deferred. When you pull the money out, as long as you use it for these qualified expenses, you don't pay taxes on the earnings. And that's how a 529 plan works. So for the U Fund, again, this is for use at any accredited college in the country, actually some international colleges as well, and some vocational training schools, as long as they are set up to take U.S. federal funds. So there's a lot of variety in how the 529 plans can be used. The U-Plan, it's more circumscribed, but the effects can be quite dramatic. So we'll see that in a minute. For the U-Plan, this does have to be used at a participating college if you are going to retain the value, that percentage of tuition that you locked in. It has to be used at a participating college, of which there are over 70, and they're all in Massachusetts, and we'll see them in just a minute. Also, the U-Plan must be used for undergraduate education only, whereas the U-Fund 529 plan can be used for undergraduate or graduate programs. Now, of course, with the U-Plan, the big question is always, okay, well, if they have to use it at one of these participating colleges. What happens if the child doesn't end up going to one of those participating colleges? If that's the case, you can do one of three things. You can hold on to the funds until, you can hold on to the funds once they mature if you think that the student may change their mind. Let's say that plans aren't final after high school, you have this U-Plan money coming up, you think, maybe, my child's not going right to college, but he or she may later on. You can wait on that for a while. We can hold on to these certificates for up to 6 years or so after they're set to mature. And we'll talk about maturity and all that stuff in just a little while. So you can do that. You can sort of just wait and see what happens. And you could also you could do that with the 529 as well. And again, just like the 529, you can transfer beneficiaries. So if you have saved for a child, and that child doesn't end up going to a particular college or a college at all, but there's somebody else in the family that could use those funds, you can transfer those funds over to that other beneficiary. So that's the case with both the U-Plan and the U-Fund. Now for the U-Plan and the U-Fund, it diverges from the U-Fund here. If you have to withdraw funds and you can't use them for a qualified expense, you can't use it for, in the case of the U-Plan, a participating college, then you just get what you put in plus the interest back. And there's no tax consequences for doing that. So really the worst you're going to do is get what you put in plus the interest back from the U-Plan without tax consequences. And the interest accrues at CPI on the general obligation bonds. Whereas the U-Fund, if you have to withdraw funds and use it for an ineligible expense, then the earnings are subject to a 10% penalty, and they'll be taxed at the owner's rate of income. There's one more thing with the U-Fund that I'll mention. It's written here that if the beneficiary doesn't end up going to college, you can transfer funds into a Roth IRA for that beneficiary. And it has some sort of stipulations that you have to meet, but that is a new option. I think it was just last year that it was put into place, and people are really excited about it because that's a fear that a lot of people have, is that they're going to set aside money for their child for college. If they're not going to use it, they're going to get a tax hit. So there is a way to still sort of contribute to the welfare of the beneficiary and not be subject to those taxes. But the big difference between these two plans comes with the cash out if you're not going to be able to use the funds the way you intended them. So for the U-Plan, you just get what you put in plus the interest back, no tax consequences for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and none federally. If you live outside of Massachusetts, your state laws may be different. Okay, I see a question here. Okay, so it's about contributions to a 529, I think. Obviously, so basically, let me deal with that in a little bit, if you don't mind. I'll come back to that at the end because I think it's on another topic. But okay, so this is how I want to explain, generally speaking, how the U-Plan works. You put in a certain amount of money. Depending on that amount, that's going to buy a percentage of tuition at each participating college in the plan. So let's say that your contribution for this year is $1,500. So if you put in $1,500 starting in 2025, and you say, my child is going to school in, well, let's say 2040, what year do we have here? 2035, rather. Let's say you put in $1,500, and at a particular college that costs $15,000, that buys 10% of tuition. You say, okay, 10% of tuition, my child is set to go to school in 2035. By the time my child goes to college in 2035, if he goes to that particular college, let's say that college tuition has increased to $30,000. So it's doubled, right? Well, in that case, in that case, our value grows along with it. So let's see here, $1,500 invested in 2025 university tuition of $15,000. Okay, that buys 10% of tuition locked in. By 2035, tuition has increased to $30,000, so we have 10% of $30,000 or $3,000. So our $1,500 investment today doubled to $3,000 in 2035 because tuition doubled to $30,000 in 2035. So our investment is keeping pace with the increase in tuition. And that really is the essence of the U-Plan. So it's essentially a bet that the increase in tuition will outpace the cost of inflation, as historically it has done. So this year, let's say, again, in our example, we're putting in $1,500. $15,000 is the cost of tuition of that one particular college. If we put in that same amount next year, at that particular college, tuition has gone up from this year to next year. So our $1,500 is not going to buy 10% next year if that tuition has gone up. It may buy 9%, may buy 9.5%. So essentially that 9% or 9.5% would be added on to that 10%, and you would have 19.5% of tuition. And then, the next year and so on. So you would get an annual statement every year that shows you the amount that you put in, the interest that accrued on it, each participating college and university, and what percentage of tuition you have purchased there for the maturity years that you selected. And again, just a reminder that the U-Plan locks in only tuition and mandatory fee expenses. So tuition is tuition. Mandatory fees are defined as fees that every student has to pay, regardless of their major, regardless of the year in college that they are in, regardless of whether or not they live on campus. So, certain students, freshman orientation fees won't be covered, for example, because that only affects freshmen. Room and board expenses are not covered because that only affects students who live on campus and not commuter students. Lab fees would only affect certain students taking certain classes. So mandatory fees are defined as tuition. Mandatory fees are defined as fees that every student has to pay, regardless of those circumstances. And schools get us their tuition and their mandatory fee figures. They don't necessarily break down to us what are considered mandatory fees or not, but they just say, here's tuition and here's mandatory fees for the upcoming year. So we can figure our percentages and the value of our percentages based on those. And this slide is just to show you, of course, that various colleges have various tuitions, and that the same initial investment of $1,500 in this example is going to buy differing percentages of tuition and fees at different colleges. So college A is $15,000. From our example, we bought 10% of tuition. College B, $30,000, we bought 5%. And college C of $50,000, we bought 3% of tuition. So I see some questions coming in here. Let me see if I can answer them. Great question. So I am going to answer this in a minute, but I'll answer it now. Do you have to pick the college or university when you sign up for the U-Plan? You do not. You don't pick that. The only thing you pick when you are signing up for the U-Plan, you have to choose who the owner of the account is. The owner is the only person who can actually transact, so they can only take funds out if you're the owner and direct them. You have to choose the beneficiary, so the student. And then you have to pick the maturity year or years. So this is one or more years that the student should be enrolled in college for. And so this is, since the funds are invested in general obligation bonds, that is the maturity year of the bond. So those are the things that and of course, how much you're putting in and the regularity with which you're putting money in. Okay, so the next question is, are all the participating colleges included, and whatever school is picked, there will be a look back as to what your percentage was each year? Yeah, so you'll get an annual statement every year. It shows you what percentage you purchased, and you'll be able to also call our U-Plan department or access your account online and get assistance with that as well. So you'll be able to figure out what percentage you have purchased, and then as things approach closer to maturity, you'll be able to figure out how much that actually translates to at a school. Okay, thank you. Good questions. Okay, so that's generally how the plan works, the basics of how it operates. You can open up a U.Plan account at any point throughout the year, and you can contribute to the account throughout the year as well. It used to be that we had a 2-month enrollment period every year, and you had to get your enrollments in. You can open it throughout the year now and contribute throughout the year, with the exception of a 2-week blackout period that lasts between July 15th and August 1st. And so the reason that there is this blackout period is that, as I mentioned, the U.Plan funds are invested in general obligation bonds. So there is a bond purchase every year. So we take all the funds that customers have contributed to their account throughout the year. They put funds in. It's handled at our servicers. This contribution accrues interest at a money market rate. And then at the bond purchase, whatever balance you have, your contributions plus the interest, that is the money that purchases your certificate and locks in your percentage. And so that is set on July 15th, and the bond purchase occurs August 1st. And it buys a percentage of that year's tuition and fees. Okay, you lock in the rates at over 70 public and private colleges in Massachusetts. Your savings must be over $300 though in order to do that. So $300 is the minimum to purchase a U.Plan certificate. You can open an account with nothing. You can open an account and put $10 in. You can put $100. You can put whatever amount it is that you want in there. But in order to lock in tuition, you have to have at least $300 in your account by the time of the bond purchase. So let's say you open an account in September and you contribute, $100 every month to that account. Well, by the time July 15th rolls around, you'll have about $1,000 or so. So you'll be able to lock in about $1,000 plus the interest of whatever and lock in whatever percentage that is. If you opened up that same account, for example, in the beginning of July, and you put in $100, or June, you put in $100 in June, and you put in $100 in July, that's not going to be enough to buy a certificate and to lock in a percentage of tuition. So what would happen then is your money would just stay in the account. It would continue accruing interest. And let's say you're contributing $100 a month, then by that time next year, you would have surpassed $300 and be able to purchase a percentage of the following year's tuition with that $100. So that's how that works. Now there is a minimum of $300. There is no maximum limit. So there's no maximum to the amount you can put in the plan. And you are not required to live in Massachusetts in order to participate in the U.Plan. Now, on the topic of the bond purchase and the percentage of tuition that you lock in, it gets a little tricky because of the timing. So funds deposited by July 15th, 2025. So this year's upcoming bond purchase, we're going to take all those funds that you contributed to your account and buy a percentage of tuition. But the tuition that we're going to be basing that purchase on is 2025-2026, because it occurs August 1st. That is the beginning of the 2025-2026 academic year. So in a sense, you're putting funds in now and you're buying next year's rate, because when the bond purchase occurs, again, that's going to be the next academic year. So there might be a little bit of guesswork if you're trying to figure out exactly how much you want to put in, if you have a school in mind, if you have a percentage in mind, if you want to, have really firm plans in that respect. It might be difficult to get it exact. So you may have to estimate a little bit. Or the other thing is this: we send out, notifications to the colleges in spring asking for their tuition and mandatory fees. And some of them respond to us very quickly and get us the upcoming year's tuition and fee figures. Some of them set it quite late in the year, but we are updating them as they come in. So you can check on whether or not, if you have a college in mind, whether or not they have gotten their tuition and fees to us, and sort of work out what percentage of tuition you're going to purchase with your contributions. Funds deposited after July 15th, 2025. So again, if you're contributing throughout the year, all the funds that you have deposited before July 15th are going to go towards the 2025-2026 year. After August 1st, after the bond purchase, anything received is going to go towards the 2026-2027 academic year tuition and mandatory fee rate. So it's a bit split in the middle of the year. Any questions on any of this? I know this might sound really confusing, so I'm just, don't be afraid to ask questions. Okay, well. So some more benefits of the U-Plan. The money does grow federal and Massachusetts state tax free. There is one or two tax forms that may be generated. Probably the most relevant one is a 1099 DIV that you may receive. And the reason for that is, when you invest in the plan, you buy certificates, you select a maturity year, money is invested in that bond, and it's accruing interest at CPI, the Consumer Price Index. None of that money is taxable. After the funds mature, let's say you set a maturity date that you believe is going to be your child's freshman year in college. Maybe you're off by a year and you have to keep funds in 1 year late and use it the following year. You can do that, and your account will still continue to accrue interest at a money market value after it is matured. So all of that interest, that post-maturity interest that accrues after a certificate is matured, if it's over $10, then it has to be sent out to you in a 1099. And the same thing with pre-bond purchase interest. So remember I said you put money in, it's held in an account, it accrues interest at a money market value before the bond purchase. If that interest accrues interest, if that contribution accrues interest over $10 in a year, that has to be sent out to you in a 1099 as well. Now, you may or may not, we're not tax professionals, you may or may not be paying taxes on that money. That's between you and your tax preparer. But that is probably the only time that there may be any tax consequences, and it's not related to using the funds at all. It's regarding interest that has accrued on it after or before maturity. So any unused money is returned without penalty and with interest accrued at CPI. Again, this is our circumstance where the student can't use the funds at a participating college and has to cash out. And savers can claim, if you're living in Massachusetts or paying Massachusetts income tax, you can claim a deduction of up to $1,000 for your contributions if you're an individual filer, or $2,000 for your contributions if you are a married filer filing jointly. So that's just another sort of incentive, and that is something that is shared with the 529 plans as well. Now, to answer a question that's already been asked here and answered, there is no need to select a college until it's time to attend. And so here, I just want to leave this up for a minute here, because these are all the participating U-Plan colleges and universities in Massachusetts. So you can see, I believe all of the public colleges are represented. Many of the private colleges are represented as well. You can see Boston College, Babson College, Boston University, Amherst. This is in the first column. So there's a lot, and there's a lot of variety there. The colleges that maybe people are going to look for and not see right away, like Harvard, draw from, frankly, an international population. So if you are going to Harvard or MIT or one of those colleges that is not in the plan, you can, again, cash out, get what you put in plus the interest, and use that for tuition, fees, books, supplies, whatever you want to use it for. But I think, you can see that there's a wide variety of colleges here. And actually, if you go to MEFA.org and go to the U.Plan section, you can see not just all of the colleges, but you can search the colleges and it'll show you the most recent tuition and fee figures as well. So you can see what's there. Someone wants to know if you'll be taxed when you take the funds out if your child can't attend undergrad. No, you won't be taxed, at least not at the Massachusetts state level and not at the federal level. So again, if you live in another state, it's possible that there are other laws there that may make that taxable, but not here and not federally. All right. Now, sometimes people want to know what happens if a college leaves the plan or joins the plan. And I must say that the list of participating colleges has remained fairly static. Colleges, they are going to join the U-Plan, have to enter into the U-Plan agreement with the U-Plan to honor all of the certificates that were purchased since 1995, which was when the program began. So, if you have a plan already and a college just enters and you want to use that college, it has to honor those certificates that were previously purchased and sort of predate to their tuition percentages then. Consequently, if a college or university drops out of the U-Plan, it again has to honor all the certificates purchased prior to the year it withdrew from the program. So it has to grandfather that value in. As I said, the list has remained pretty static. There are some colleges that have dropped off of the list, but not because they stopped participating in the program. But there have been some school closings and some mergings over the past 15 years or so. And that's really been the big change such that there is to the list. Okay, see another question here. So if you've already contributed to the 529 and you have the maximum state income tax deduction, the contributions to the U-Plan will not get further deduction, correct? That is correct. So that limit of $2,000 or $1,000, depending on your status, is the absolute limit per filer. So, yeah. But I appreciate the questions very much. Now, in terms of how the U-Plan is treated in terms of financial aid, it's essentially treated just like any other asset is in terms of financial aid. So assuming that the parent is the owner of the U-Plan account, it is treated as a parent's asset. And as a parent's asset, it's treated just like any other parent's asset, which is to say fairly lightly in the calculations. So the value that you're going to be expected to list as part of the U-Plan, you won't have to itemize it out. But when you're saying, okay, this is my balance of assets, what you should be basing the U-Plan on is not the percentage of tuition, but just what you put in plus the interest. So let's say your current value, you put in $5,000 10 years ago, there's $500 of interest that accrued on it, then that's a $5,500 asset in terms of the FAFSA, just as an example. And of course, the financial aid formula assumes that families will use up to just 5.6% of parent assets to pay for college. So, all of the parents' assets on a scale, they'll take 5.6% of that total and say, this is what you should be using to pay for college. Income is weighted much heavier, but assets are pretty lightly weighted in the calculations. That's if the parents own the U-Plan account. If somebody other than the parent owns a U-Plan account for a child, which is possible, it could be a grandparent, could be an aunt, could be an uncle, could be anybody, then it doesn't get looked at all, really. So that's something. But again, just remember that the owner is the only person who can actually take money out of the account. So I know sometimes with assets and financial aid, people get very concerned with moving things around so that the college doesn't see this asset or that asset. Really, it shouldn't make that much of a difference, but that's how it's treated. Any other questions on the program itself before I move into how to actually enroll in the plan? Oh, I see a question coming in. If you open an account for your niece, will those assets count as assets towards your children? No. I see what you said, towards your children. No, they will not. So this is a change of the FAFSA recently. It used to be that if you had a college savings account or a 529 or something like it, that you would have to list the balances of all of them on one FAFSA. So if you had 3 kids and 2 nieces, so you get 5 accounts, you would have to list the grand total of those 5 accounts on each child's FAFSA. That's not the case anymore. It's beneficiary specific. So you would not have to do that. But thank you. It's a good question. If you are the beneficiary as the parent on the account, but not the owner, would it still be considered a parent asset? That's a good question. So if you're the beneficiary as the parent on the account, but not the owner, who's the student in this case? So is this a graduate student? The parent going to graduate school? Let me think about this. If you're the beneficiary as the parent on the account, but not the owner, will it still be considered as a parent asset? That's a good question, because I know if it's the same, possibly. I can find out, because I know that's the case with 529s, even though technically it almost never happens. But if a child is the owner of the 529, then it still gets counted as a parent asset. This is actually a good thing, because student assets are weighted heavier than parent assets. So yeah, so as a student, an asset is weighted at 20%. I'll take 20% of that asset as to what you can pay for college. So if you have $10,000, they're gonna say, okay, you can spend $2,000 of that. Whereas if it was a parent asset, you had $10,000, they'd say, okay, you can spend $560 of that. You just have the rest of it and not considered for aid. So yeah, it should be, I believe it should be listed as a parent asset, but I can double check on that and get back to you, because it's quite specific for the FAFSA, or at least it was, that if a student owns it for the 529, it still gets treated as a parent asset. Since the U.Plan is a prepaid tuition program, it's more of a niche program. Some states have prepaid plans, but it's not like 529s where every state has them. But I think it might be different, but I'm fairly certain that it sticks to the 529 rules, but I'll find out and let you know. That's a good question. Thank you. Great questions. This is good. Okay, so if you're interested in the U-Plan, and incidentally, you could do both the U-Plan and a 529 like the U-Fund. So, you could lock in tuition and fees with the U-Plan and sort of gain that value as tuition goes up, and have a 529 and use that and be able to use the tax advantage that way to use for things like room and board and books and fees and equipment. So that's possible. Regardless, if you wanted to enroll in the U-Plan, you can go to MEFA.org, go to the U-Plan page, click Start Saving. Right here. And you'd have to, start your process here by putting your first name, last name, email address, mobile number to be texted, clicking that little box and moving on. So if you want to start saving with the U-Plan, you would click Complete Enrollment Now. If you already have an account and you want to just set up an online account, you can do that. Or if you want to log in, as we have, of course, online access to the U-Plan, that's the same username and password that you're about to set up to do this that you would use to log in. So enrollment steps: provide the account owner information, that's name, date of birth, social security number, address. Decide who's going to be the owner, who's going to have the authority to transact on that account. Designate a beneficiary. So again, these are the things that you need to set up an account. Who's the owner? What's their sort of basic info? Who's going to be the student? What's their info? You can designate a successor owner, but you don't have to. and you can always do it later as well. So what a successor owner is, as I mentioned, the owner is the only person who can use the account. If something were to happen to the owner, if the owner were to pass away, and there's a successor owner on the account, then the ownership will be able to be easily transferred over to that successor owner, where they could then just assume ownership of the account and be in control and transact. If there's no successor, a lot of people assume it just goes straight to the beneficiary, but you need to be 18 to be the owner of the U-Plan. So many times a beneficiary is not going to be 18. So it's not set up that way. It would have to go to probate, and there would have to be, who's the executor of the estate, and it's just a more lengthy process than if there's a successor owner. But you need, name, social security number, and date of birth, and some info that you may not have when you're setting up. So you can choose to skip that option, and if you want to add it later, you can always do that. Okay, so you need to know those things. Really, the most important part of this is going to be selecting maturity years. And let me tell you why. So the maturity years are the years in which the bonds are set to mature. Money is put into a bond, it's invested, but that money is not liquid until the bond matures. Meaning, if you put money in and you say, okay, I am selecting 2035 to use this money, you're not really going to be able to get that money until 2035. And it matures August 1st of its maturity year. So August 1st of 2035, because the money is not liquid yet. So the maturity year or years should be one or more year that the student is anticipated to be in college. Now, we have a maturity year selection guide on our website that says if your child's in grade 5, for example, this is the year that they should be entering college. Grade 6, this is, et cetera, et cetera. Take your best guess, especially if you're saving early, which is the best way to start saving, is really, really early. It's going to be a little bit difficult to figure out exactly which year they're going to be starting college. So it's not unusual for people to be a year early or a year late. Now, things happen too. People get held back, people skip grades, there might be medical issues that come up, they're not ready to start school yet. Again, we can hold on to these until 6 years after your maturity year. So let's say you anticipate a year early, and it turns out, instead of 2035, your child is going to go to school in 2036. So if that happens, we can just hold on to that certificate and you can use it in 2036. You should mention now that the percentage that you have purchased is a percentage of the maturity year's tuition. So it's not going to continue to keep pace with tuition once it's matured. There'll still be interest that gets added to it, but it's not going to keep pace with tuition. It's frozen at that maturity year level. So that is, in our example of we put in $1,500 this year, that buys 10% of tuition. College is $30,000 in 2035. So he's got 10% of $30,000 or $3,000. Even if that child goes to school in 2036, they still have $3,000 because you have a percentage of the maturity year's tuition. And so that's what you have, is 2035's tuition. So you still get all of the value up until the year it matures. It's just that after that. If you selected a year that is too late and you want to move it earlier, you can request that, and we'll see if we can do that. Same thing with early withdrawals. If you have an emergency and you want to get those funds out that you put in, you can request it, and if we can honor that we'll do it. But it depends on our bond supply. There's a lot of sort of behind the scenes things that need to happen. We do keep a running tally of all those requests, and we try to meet them, but it's not guaranteed that we'll be able to do it. So you want to select your maturity year or maturity years. So that is, you can select 1 year or you can select 4 years for maturity years. So you can buy a percentage of tuition for each anticipated year this year, or you can try to front load it for the first year, or people have different strategies. but that's what you need to do. And then you can put your funds in, and you can do a one-time deposit, or you can set up an automatic withdrawal. Okay, somebody wants to know, does the Roth IRA count as a student asset? Does a Roth IRA count as a student asset? No, it's a retirement asset. So if it's a retirement IRA, or if it's an education IRA, it depends on who the owner of that is. I'm not an expert on IRAs, but let me come back to that. So if the student is the owner of the Roth IRA, then it would be a student asset, and it would be taken at 20%. Same thing with the UJMA or UTMA account, student asset at 20%. Okay, so make a one-time savings deposit or set up automatic savings. So this is what I just mentioned earlier. Selecting maturity year is probably the most important thing you'll do. Now, in terms of adding funds, you can add your bank account information when you're setting up your account online. You can send in a check. So a couple of different ways you could make deposits. We also have, and it's fairly recent, a gift of college card that you can, if somebody gives a gift of college card to you, you can use that to put into your U.Plan. And again, you can do a one-time enrollment, or you can have automatic withdrawals, and you can set that up for a monthly withdrawal, or a withdrawal that's quarterly, or a different sort of frequency. And you can do that throughout the year. And again, the purchase, the percentage that is going to be based on your balance in your account on July 15th. Now, once you have your account set up and you have online access to that account, you can use that to add more money into your account. You can review your statements. We currently send out quarterly statements as well as annual statements. So I think that may be changing and going back to annual statements, but you can check your balance. That is what you have plus the interest. You can actually request disbursements through the account online or over the phone even. At the moment, you're able to do that. So you can handle cash outs, that is a cash out to you as an owner and get what you put in plus the interest, or direct it to a college and get the percentage of tuition. And you can change your contact information as well. So getting started, you can enroll at MEFA.org/U.Plan. That's a QR code there. If you wanted to start that enrollment process, just take a picture of that QR code. It'll send you right to that proper page. Again, in general, you can sign up for MEFA emails on MEFA.org to receive timely college planning and guidance. And you can use MEFA's college cost projector to estimate future college costs. So there's lots of different calculators and tools on MEFA.org to be able to estimate future college costs. Just bear in mind that is probably not, well, we do have a future cost calculator that does not take into account financial aid. So if you see a gigantic cost, ask yourself, is there aid involved here? Because a lot of people forget about financial aid. And the fact is that most families are going to be eligible for some level of financial aid. So connect with us on our social media platforms, Facebook, that's MEFA MA, MEFA_MA at Instagram, at MEFA Tweets on X, our YouTube channel, our podcast, and our LinkedIn information there. If you have any questions in the future, this is our phone number and our email address at collegeplanning@mefa.org. And I will be available to answer any questions. Let me see, take a quick spin at some of those questions that I held off on. I'm going to stop recording as well.